Good afternoon. This is Debra B. Wilson. It is Saturday, and the date is the 20th of February, 2021. The time is 1500 hours and 28 minutes GMT, and I am in Bradford, that's West Yorkshire, in England. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, and I thought I should do something, if nothing else, to keep myself focused on my research and thinking about how I understand my research. And in that light, this brief podcast is about identity. So we name identities. You're old, you're tall, you're short, you're young, you're black, you're white, you're British, you're Canadian, you're Israeli. And then we assign normatives. There's normatives that surround British identity, how we understand it. We assign normatives. We assign normatives to how we understand Canadian and Israeli identities, respectively. I'm 63 years old. I always say my age so you have a point of reference. When I was in high school in Chicago, I was attending a Catholic school. I attended Catholic schools all the way through for my education, on to including university, except for postgraduate study. I'm digressing. I always have to be specific. It's the auditor in me, but I'm meandering. In any case, when I was attending high school as a teenager, I realized I wanted a life of service. And I didn't understand exactly how that would work itself out. So I thought the nunhood. I made very early investigations into what that meant and had every intention once I was older to take that path. I became very focused on being a nun and how I understood being a nun in the Blessed Virgin Mary Order, the BVM. Because of the way I understood my feminism, I didn't think that was compatible with being a nun. Now at 63, I realize you do what you will with an identity. But in any case, I looked at a different paths to live my life of service within an expression of religiosity and under the umbrella of feminism. So I started traveling internationally. I was living in Chicago, and I started traveling abroad on a regular basis. And my point of destination often, although it's not the only country I have traveled to, was the United Kingdom, London to be specific. And in London, as I've said before in other podcasts, it wasn't enough just to have the privilege of traveling leisurely 3 to 4 times to London. I had to do something. So I started doing volunteer work, and my volunteer work eventually led me to participating in a feminist-based activism that was doing a critical analysis of the UK's national security model. I was not born in this country, so I was a foreigner. In addition, several years ago, I lived in a community, I'm stammering a bit, in Ireland that had a population of the provisional IRA. And so that was in the late 1990s. And so there was always, the best way to put it, curiosity from the British government about who and what I was. So now I'm analyzing the UK's national security model. I was looking at SO15, the Counter-Terrorism Police, and MI5. The people that initially interviewed me repeatedly were SO15, the Counter-Terrorism Police. And then at one point I was interviewed by people I believe to have been MI5. It's very difficult to explain to people who are doing national security that you feel drawn to give service out of your religiosity. It's particularly problematic explaining the basis for your activities through the prism of religion, because some other people that have sought to harm this country have also used religiosity as a basis for their destructive behavior. So it was always challenging for me to communicate to the state, the UK government, why I was doing what I was doing and continued to do. But it is out of service. It's not enough to be in a place. You have to participate in that place and in a constructive manner. So here I was, a Black American woman in London, England, and if I saw something that I had a question about national security, I wrote a paper. If I saw something and wondered if the state could do it a different way, I wrote a paper and submitted it to Home Office. I was in Birmingham at the tail end of 2010. I saw some things there that were concerning for me, and I questioned the way the state, that would be SO15 and MI5 again, I questioned how they understood the situation in Birmingham and the multi-layered nature of some lack of cohesion between communities. So I sent an email, not one, but two, to the then Home Secretary, Theresa May. So all of this is to say this little bit of meandering, going here and there and everywhere, is how identity, how people construct their identity, really is quite individualistic. There are normatives we all assign to every identity. But then what we choose to do with that identity when it's one of ours is very much an individual decision. And I would never dispute the fact that outside influences, where you are, when you are, and who you are in a society, without a doubt influence how you experience that identity. But nevertheless, we define how we see a Catholic nun, a middle-aged feminist, a Black American woman. I know some nuns in America, some American nuns. Some are former nuns, some are still working as nuns. And I look and listen to those women and understand how they define their religiosity, and it's through a life of service. And that service may be teaching, it may be, I knew a nun that had a PhD in economics. I've known nuns who were in the medical professions. I've known nuns who were active in the civil rights movement. You do what you will with an identity. And in countries and places and spaces that you have the opportunity to expand and define and nuance that identity, you will do what you do. This is a podcast to get me reacclimated, get my feet wet again in this space. But I wanted to keep it on a subject that's near and dear to me. Ultimately, this is under the umbrella of national security. And under that umbrella, I'm always curious how people define an identity. This is Debra V. Wilson, and I am in Bradford. Thank you.